What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you how to convert your neoprene PCV hose to a hose with AN line, so stay tuned. So I used to have the neoprene hose on there. It's just like a weird hose that comes up behind the alternator, where the alternator sits in the factory location, down to the engine block, and it just allows, the positive pressure from the valve cover to circulate back into the engine block. But this fitting right here is actually just a press in. It's not welded in, it's not glued in, it's actually steel, it's not aluminum. It just presses into this right here, and then that's where the neoprene hose comes off, and then it runs down behind the alternator. The alternator was here in the factory location. It runs behind it, and then it goes down to a fitting down on the engine block down there. Mine actually started leaking pretty bad, so I decided to go this route and get rid of it. The hose is like 45 bucks on Drift Motion, but I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to, like I said, keep the theme of those AN fitting lines, the ones that I've made there on top of the valve cover here. So what I did was use a -12 push lock fitting, and I ordered a stainless steel, or it might have been just a steel -12 weld on bung. So I was able to MIG weld the fitting onto that hose barb. So what I did was I took this fitting here, so you can see the steel -12 bung. This is the piece that presses into the valve cover. This is the other piece here. So it would have been something kind of like this. So I took this piece, I just cut off the end. This is the piece that the neoprene hose would hook onto. I cut that off of here, made sure it was all nice and flat, and then I took it and I welded the steel bung onto this, and I made sure that I had enough material here for it to press back into the valve cover. Then I took the push lock fitting, so again, -12 push lock hose. I made sure I got oil resistant rubber hose, and this piece will screw onto here. Okay, and then that's the piece that goes into the valve cover. On the other end, I just used a heat gun and I heated up the rubber here so I could push it over that fitting that's in the block, and I'll show you what that looks like. This was able to stretch enough to go over that fitting on the block, which looks kind of similar to this fitting here. It pushes over that. I just put a hose clamp on there and it's good to go. There's not a ton of pressure. There is pressure, but not a ton to cause this hose right here to come off of the fitting, so I'm not too concerned about that part of it. So there's the open hole right there on the valve cover, and then you can see right there, that is the fitting that's in the block, and it's pressed in there. I was going to cut that off and weld another -12 bung on that, but like I said, I could get that rubber hose to fit over the top of that, so I didn't want to cut any of that and potentially have pieces of metal fall into the engine block and then have to try to fish them out. I don't know if this will work with the factory location of the alternator. I tried to get the push lock fitting that was the tightest radius as possible to keep it as close to the engine as I could. So again, I don't know if that will work with the factory location of the alternator. It's pretty tight to that part of it, but I don't know if there's going to be enough room for that fitting to reach down there and run along that. The size of hose that I used, so a -12 push lock is usually like a 3/4 inch inside diameter hose. So it was still a little small for that lower hose barb that's on the block, but like I said, once I heated it up with the heat gun, it pressed on just fine. I had to kind of just wiggle it back and forth, and then it slid right on, and then it was fine. Once it cooled down, then it made the good seal, and then like I said, I just threw a hose clamp on there, so I didn't have any issues with it leaking. Now, throwing this back in, you can see that it kind of just pushes into this spot right here. You could put some RTV on here. The factory one doesn't come with RTV or any O-rings or anything, it just presses in. What I do is I just get this kind of centered in, get it started, and then I use a rubber mallet, just kind of tap it in until it bottoms out. You don't want to go crazy with it. You're not going to use like a sledgehammer and smash it in there. It doesn't work that way. You can see I've got a little bit of clearance here to where that fitting will fit just fine with no issues, and then it doesn't stick that far out from the valve cover. So I put the bottom on first, so you can see it. That fitting right down there. I just press this guy on first. Okay, so again, 3/4 inch hose, 3/4 inch ID will fit on that just fine. And then you'll have to put just a little bit of a twist on this as you start to screw this in. You don't want to cross thread any of this here. through a hose clamp on the bottom here, so I don't have to worry about any oil leaking out the bottom of the hose here and run down the engine block. But other than that, it's pretty easy, and you can see how close it sits to the valve cover. Again, I like I said before, I don't know as far as the alternator location if this will run into that. I know the factory neoprene one, it kind of runs like out and around and down. It's kind of like a pretty big hose. So again, I don't know if this will clear that, but for my particular application, it does. And like I said, I wanted to keep it as close to the valve cover as I could, and I didn't really have any issues. Didn't run into the throttle cable bracket here that I had to custom make for this intake manifold. I'm sure some of you guys were like, why don't you just buy the $45 rubber hose? It won't fit on this. So with my intake manifold, the new forward facing intake manifold, that neoprene hose comes out so far and then it goes down that I won't have any room for it. It'll run into that. So here's a piece of the old rubber hose. Like I said, it's a neoprene. It's not like a actual harder rubber. It's like very soft and it just leaks really easily. Some of you guys picked up in my other video that I had just a straight plug into the valve cover. I know it's not ideal. I was just very temporary. Pulled all that stuff out. Now the AN fitting hose and all that stuff's on there. So it's a little bit smaller than the factory neoprene hose that you can get like from Drift Motion. But I think with the other valve cover breathers, to go to the catch can, the AN fittings, I think between that and then the one that I put on the side of the valve cover back to the engine block, I probably have enough circulation and things that I don't need to worry about, positive pressure inside the valve covers or, have potentially blow by and stuff in the cylinder. So I think I'm probably good with that size hose. Like I said, dash 12, it's pretty big. I don't think I could fit a bigger fitting in there. That bung that I welded on there, it fit perfect onto this piece right here. It sat perfect inside this. So when I cut this piece off, I cut it where this little rib is right here. So I cut it on the outside of it. So I was working with this bigger piece here, and that bung was able to slip inside there. So, and then here's the steel bung that I used. And then here's the piece of tubing that came out of the valve cover. You can see that they are pretty dang close. It almost presses in right now. So when I did this, I just put weld right across the top of this, and then I just ground it down, made it nice and smooth so you couldn't even tell that it was welded on there. Worked pretty good. If you're gonna weld this, be careful not to get too much heat in there. Also with this, not to use too much heat because it'll blow through this. This is pretty thin wall steel tubing. So be careful when you're welding that because you can cause some problems and blow through it, then try to fill it and it'll just be a mess. So just be careful of what you're doing with that when you go to weld it. If you guys are interested in doing what I did on this to your car, I will put in the description below where I got everything. It's all purchased from Amazon. I just made sure I got higher quality stuff. That press lock or the push lock fitting, it was like $30 itself, so it was kind of expensive. And again, some people might be like, oh, I'll just bag it and buy the $45 hose from Drift Motion. If that's what you want to do, go for it. Easy fix. You just press it on, put hose clamps on, call it a day. So this only took me a little while to make. It wasn't hard. I tried to measure the hose, the rubber hose part of it, to make sure I had enough distance between the push lock fitting and then the block, and then I just cut it and threw it in there. So it was pretty easy. The next video that you guys have been interested in are the over fenders. You can see that I've got one of them on there already. This thing is pretty sweet. I'm running a 1.5 inch spacer. I know it's not ideal. I'm gonna have to get some different wheels because obviously it's gonna sit out a lot further. You can see how much the wheel actually sticks out from the fender, the inside of the car there. But it's pretty aggressive, looks pretty good. Like I said before in the other video, it actually fits pretty good on there from, right from out of the box. I've got to trim a couple pieces here to make sure this fits nice and flush and bring it in just a little bit. You can see I've got a little bit of a gap right here that I've got to close up. And then the trim piece back here, it fits okay, but I've got to just kind of go in and sand some of this down. But it looks pretty aggressive. I like it. I've got to go in and cut some of this inside here, but I will do a video on that when I start to install these. You guys know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate everyone that has subscribed so far and all the comments that I've been getting. If I don't get back to you, I apologize. I'm trying to get through, if you guys have a question or whatever, I try to reply if I can. So if I haven't, again, I apologize, but I'll try to get there. And again, as always, if you guys want to see something or you have a question on your car, let me know and I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. So thanks again. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys on the next one.